academic events involving speakers and participants from India. To that end, we are continuing to hold these online webinars, which we started during lockdowns, even though COVID restrictions on in-person gatherings have now been lifted here. These webinars continue to enable us to invite speakers and welcome audience members from India. Each IndOx webinar is organized by one of our divisions, and today's is the Social Sciences Divisional webinar. One of the key goals of IndOx is to support early career researchers, or ECRs, and students to whom we offer research funding and the opportunity to lead academic events and activities. Today's webinar is organized by one of our ECRs, Dr. Amog Sharma. Amog wrote a path-breaking doctoral thesis on how India's party politics and elections have been and continue to be decisively shaped by the growing influence of political consultants and professional media and campaign managers. After completing his DPhil, Amog was a departmental lecturer in South Asian Studies for a year. He's currently an ESRC postdoctoral research fellow working on the use of digital technology and data science in managing political mobilization and propaganda. Amog will lead and chair today's webinar, and I will now hand over to him. So over to you, Amog. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandini. And once again, a very warm welcome to everyone who's joining us for this panel discussion on the 2022 UP election results. We have here with us two excellent speakers. We are having some technical difficulties with Professor Pai joining us, but hopefully that will be resolved very soon. But before I introduce the speakers, I want to say a few words on the motivation and the intellectual inquiry that went behind organizing today's panel. As we all know, it has been a little over a month since the results for the UP elections were declared, where the BJP emerged victorious with 255 out of the total 403 seats in the UP Assembly, along with its many alliance partners. This has been one of the first times in nearly 4 decades that a single party has managed to secure a second consecutive term in office in the state. I believe the last party to hold this distinction was the Indian National Congress back in 1985. But the BJP's ability to defy anti-incumbency is noteworthy, not merely because of the time that has elapsed since we last saw this trend, but also because the socio-political situation that existed in the lead up to the election results suggested that this result was in some ways unlikely. And here I'm thinking of both the farmers' protest as well as the fallout from the devastating COVID Delta wave that ripped through the country roughly an year back. UP, of course, was at the center of both these developments. I do want to note here that UP is of course not the only state that went to the polls early this year. We have also had simultaneous elections in Punjab, where I did fieldwork myself earlier this year, as well as in Goa, Uttarakhand, and Manipur. So it is worth clarifying that the decision to organize a panel on just UP should not be seen as an attempt to reinforce some sort of North India-centric bias in the study of Indian politics. At the same time, we cannot deny the relative importance that UP has as a bellwether state and its ability to shape a larger pan-India conversation. And also because, as I just said, UP election results have thrown up a certain number of interesting puzzles for us as scholars. BJP's victory is certainly one of them. The seemingly dramatic collapse of the Bahujan Samaj Party is another question that needs addressing. Equally, one may ask if the party system in UP is now evolving towards a two-party system between the Samajwadi Party and the BJP. So to answer these questions, let me now introduce our speakers. Firstly, we have here with us, we'll be starting off with Dr. Rahul Verma. Dr. Verma is a fellow at the Center for Policy Research based in New Delhi and a visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science at Ashoka University. His research interests include voting behavior, party politics, political violence, and media. He is the co-author with Professor Pradeep Chhabbar of the widely acclaimed and popular book, Ideology Identities, one that I personally enjoyed reading. He regularly writes columns for various news platforms and has published papers in the Asian Survey, EPW, and Studies in Indian Politics. Those of you who are familiar with his writing would know that he manages to combine his expertise with quantitative data sets on Indian elections with a deep familiarity with the socio-political nuances of the things that characterize Indian politics. So before I pass on to Dr. Verma, and then subsequently, once we have Professor Pai with us, we will introduce her. Two short housekeeping notices. Firstly, we shall be recording this event and it will be made available afterwards through the IndOx YouTube channel and the IndOx website. So please do follow us there. And secondly, we will have a question and answers round after we have had opening remarks from our panelists. So we would like you to type out your questions for the speakers, but please do so in the Q&A box and not the chat box. Often the two do get confused. It becomes difficult to monitor both. But if there are any technical difficulties, do point them out in the chat box and our administrator will look after that. Right. So please do start typing in your questions as and when you have them. And for now, I will pass on to Rahul. Rahul, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Amok. Let me first share my slides and then we can start the conversation. Just a second. Amog, is this visible? Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Thank you, Nandini and Amog, for inviting me, and thank you, Oxford India Center. It's a pleasure and honor to share the panel with Professor Pai, who will be joining us shortly. Professor Pai has been studying UP for much of her academic life. And in that sense, what I know about UP is sort of like a drop in the ocean. What I will try to do in my time, I hope I have 10 to 15 minutes, is to present some data on what happened in 2022 election. And I'll try to join the dots, some of the puzzles that Amog raised, basically about the perhaps evolving bipolarity in UP, the puzzle of BSP's decline and BJP's ability to retain UP for the second consecutive time, and especially since independence, no chief minister in UP has come back to power after serving 2 terms. Last time it was just around independence, Govind Ballabh Pant. So Yogi Adityanath, in that sense, when he was leading BJP's charge in 2022, was contesting against the weight of history. No incumbent has come back to power and no chief minister has come back to power. But Yogi Adityanath managed to defy both those odds. Just to give you a background, and as Amog also mentioned, there were 5 state elections. And in some ways, the big picture takeaway from the verdict is that BJP, in fact, should have a sigh of relief, given that they were not doing particularly well in state assembly elections since 2018. They had faced difficulty in coming back to power in Haryana in 2019, couldn't make government in Maharashtra, lost Jharkhand. In 2020, they lost Delhi. Bihar, they managed to come only after a great struggle, and that to an alliance. In 2021, they couldn't make inroads in Kerala and Tamil Nadu, West Bengal. They couldn't match their own expectations. So in last 2 to 3 years, and especially in the backdrop of many civil society protests, as Amok pointed out, first the CANRC and then the farmers movement, and then the 2 years of devastating pandemic, and people have seen what happened in UP. So given that backdrop, BJP managed to actually retain 4 out of 4 states. And that's a big thing for them going forward. In fact, Prime Minister in his victory speech said that the results actually seal the fate of 2024 in that sense. So what happened in UP 2022 and why did the BJP manage to win comfortably? So those of you who have been in UP or have seen the map of UP, this graph or the map actually has 2 elements. One, it's basically by color. So the yellowish color indicates BJP's victory and the red color shows Samajwadi Party's victory. But what you can see and the height of those pyramids basically tell you the extent or the margin of victory. So the red dots are basically around the western UP, the Bagpat Meerut region, where much of like the farmers' mobilization actually took place. So on the Delhi border, on the UP side of Delhi border, people who were protesting actually came from these districts. And these districts are also stronghold of Rashtriya Lok Dal, which is an ally of which was an ally of Samajwadi Party in this election. Then you see these red dots around Moradabad, Rampur region, which is a bit like the Muslim population in these regions are higher compared to others. So SP again managed to do slightly better there. The region around Agra is basically the stronghold of Yadav family, the Itawa belt. They did really well there. And then basically, finally, closer to Azamgarh and eastern UP region. In other parts of the UP, BJP not only won, they won big in many ways. And so, despite all the clamor that this election is going to be close and SP might have an advantage by the end, what we saw that BJP sailed through very comfortably. They managed to cross 40% in vote share, and they managed to get more than 250 seats. So what actually happened in UP? And the reason why I think people misread the UP campaign is that everyone was thinking of 2017 election result as the benchmark of what BJP can manage to achieve and what its peak was. So in 2017, BJP managed to win 312 seats out of 403 with just 37-38% vote share. And so everyone thought that given the situation on economy, pandemic, factionalism within BJP, BJP is likely to lose a couple of percentage points and it will basically go down below 35, whereas SP is likely to increase its vote share in early 30s and mid 30s, and that's why the election would become really competitive. Actually, everyone sort of like overlooked the fact that in 2019 Lok Sabha elections, BJP managed to cross a 50% vote share mark in UP, and that too when SP and BSP and RLD contested as a pre-election ally. So BJP's base going in 2022 election was not 37%, it was above 50%. So this graph, what we actually did, we divided UP for 2017, 2019, and 2022 by 7 phases in which election happened. And if you look at for each phase, the red dot basically denotes BJP's vote share in 2017. The maroonish dot is 2019, and the yellow dot is 2022. So what's happening across each phase? BJP is losing its vote share from the 2019 mark, but in all phases, BJP manages to improve from its 2017 mark, right? So the only phase was like the last phase of election 7, where BJP's vote share in 2017 and 2022 were very, very close. And that's why you saw in the previous map that Samajwadi Party actually did well in the eastern part of the state. So BJP managed to hold on to the large Hindu social coalition that it created between 2014 and 2019. And this social coalition, the way I think about it, is glued by an ethno-political majoritarianism and is mobilized by a very, very effective organizational machinery on the ground as well as online. Just to give you one piece of data, and that is from recently a book written by BJP leader Bhupendra Yadav and Ila Patnaik. They wrote in the book that at the beginning of 2019 election campaign, BJP was making 0.5 million attempted calls per day, which actually increased to 3.5 million attempted calls per day at the peak of the campaign. So it has a massive online infrastructure as well as a machinery on the ground to mobilize. And all of this is at the helm of the affairs, like at the top, whether you like it or not, both Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Yogi have an ability to not only mobilize their core base, but PM has this ability. He's one of the largest vote aggregator modern India has seen. What's actually happening, and this is basically something Amok said about the bipolarity. UP is not alone what's happening in India, and this is how we can link it to other parts of the country. This social coalition is so large that it would be really, really hard for any party to actually overcome it. And so what you saw in UP, Samajwadi Party actually managed to not only increase its vote share, it was their best performance ever in the history, that Samajwadi Party actually crossed 30% vote share mark, yet they were defeated. So very, very, like, the glass ceiling for a party like Samajwadi Party and even RJD in Bihar, because of this Hindu social coalition, is going to be very, very tough to break in. What we are, and this is my reading of elections going forward, what we are going to witness is that in any state where there is a large Muslim population present, significant Muslim population present, and BJP as a major political force, you will see bipolarization developing in that system. So it's not anything specific to or unique to UP. It happened in Delhi 2020, it happened in Bihar 2020, it happened in Bengal 2021, it happened in Assam 2021. So in all places, basically bipolarity developed. In Delhi, Congress was basically, didn't get any seat and was basically a single digit vote share party. Same thing happened with the mighty CPM and Congress of West Bengal. They were wiped out. So basically, the bipolarity, the polarization and counter-polarization on religious axis will give BJP advantage in states like UP and Bihar, but BJP will also face similar hurdles as SP faced in a state like Bengal or state like Kerala. We all discussed about the decline of BSP now. It's a known fact. The party which single-handedly formed a government in 2007 is in a long and structural decline. So what happened in 2022 is not an aberration, but basically part of the decline that began in 2009. In 2019, they managed to win 10 seats, but that was largely due to SP alliance rather than on their own. And in 2022, party's vote share actually crashed down to 12%, and they just managed to win a single seat. Who gained from the decline of BSP? If you look at these two charts, so what I'm basically doing on the x-axis, I'm basically putting the change in BSP's vote share between 2017 and 2022. And the graph which has red dots is basically showing you the change in BJP's vote share between 2017 and 2022. And the graph in green is actually showing the change in SP's vote share between 17 and 2022. And if you look at the slant line, it basically tells you that SP was the gainer of BSP's decline. What happened that between 2017 and 2022, BSP had around 20% of vote share. It came down to 12%. A large section of those who left BSP this time were actually Muslims, and they went towards the Samajwadi Party side, but also a substantial segment of lower caste and Dalits have also moved towards the BJP. So the polarization on religion axis is now in some ways complete, or it's in second phase. So BJP had already made inroads among non-Jatav Dalits beginning 2014. That got consolidated in period between 2014 and 2019. This election basically marks the beginning of inroads in BSP's core vote base, which is the Jatav vote base. So this time, the survey data, both collected by Local PCSDS and Access My India, points out that approximately 1/4 of Jatav voters have also shifted towards the BJP. And just to reiterate this point on religious polarization, you all now, the election results are 1 month old, and you all must have followed the campaign. The campaign rhetoric in some ways began by Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath invocation of 80-20, and then through various rhetoric, symbolism, both sides unleashed the kind of energies during the campaign that it would be really, really hard now to reverse the trend on religious polarization. So what these two graphs are actually doing, basically the second graph is to make the point which I'm going to make on the first one a bit simpler. But in the first graph, what we are doing is on the x-axis, we are adding the population of Muslims and SC in a constituency. And on the y-axis is measuring the vote share. So the saffron measures the vote share of BJP, the green measures the vote share of Samajwadi Party alliance, and the blue measures the BSP alliance. And so if you look at what's happening, BJP actually has a massive 10% advantage till the population of SCs and Muslims in a constituency, total population is less than 50%. Once it touches or crosses the 50% mark, then Samajwadi Party suddenly overtakes. But you know, the number of constituencies that has more than 50% Muslim plus Dalit population is very, very low. And actually the effect in the first graph becomes very clear once you look at the second graph, that all these effects are actually coming from the Muslim vote, right? It's not Dalit vote, which is basically doing the work for Samajwadi Party. It's the Muslim vote that is drawing these changes. And so SP trails behind BJP till the Muslim population is around 25-30%. And it like once the Muslim population in a constituency increases, SP overtakes. But there are just 50 or 60 odd constituencies across UP where the Muslim population is more than 30%. So SP's advantages begins only when there is a substantial Muslim population. And this is largely an effect of polarization on the religion axis. Finally, a new thing has also emerged in India's electoral map, and UP is a large signifier of that. So the historical trend on how women vote in India so far has been that basically two things were very clear. First, the turnout among women has started increasing. Earlier, they used to lack. Now, around 2019, the gap in men and women turnout became zero. And in state assembly elections, now women are more likely to turn out than men. There are different reasons for why this is happening. And I'm not going into those details, but that one trend is very, very clear. The second trend is that BJP actually used to have a gender disadvantage, meaning that BJP used to trail among women voters nationally till 2014. In 2019, that gap became indistinguishable, or in like regression analysis, you could not make out that difference. So in 2019, BJP manages to close that gender gap. What's happening post 2019 is that BJP is drawing higher proportion of women voters compared to its opposition. The trend became visible in 2020, but you could say that was Bihar and Nitish Kumar. BJP hardly had any role to play in it. But in 2021, where BJP won, that was Assam, BJP won but with advantage among women voters. This time in all four states, UP, Uttarakhand, Manipur, and Goa, in all four states where BJP won, it also had advantage among women voters. In fact, if you just make simple calculation based on women turnout and women voting for the BJP, more than half of the gap between SP and BJP's total vote share is being produced just by women voters. So women alone are putting BJP at a higher advantage. And if this trend continues, then we are basically looking at a very, very different scenario going forward. There could be multiple reasons. I have just listed three here why BJP has managed to overcome gender disadvantage. The first one is targeted welfare. The second one is law and order narrative. And third one is credible connect with BJP's leadership. But the bigger sort of like issue here is that both the social justice / Mandal parties in North India, the Samajwadi Party in UP, and RJD in Bihar face gender disadvantage. And this is something these parties will have to think about going forward. There is, of course, behind all this BJP's victory, there is the data actually hints at a new development, which is that for the first time among younger voters between the ages of 18 to 25, BJP now does not have the massive advantage it used to have in past. And so it's clear there is some sort of anxiety among younger voters related to their economic aspirations, their job prospects, and other things. And so the lead that BJP used to have among younger voters has shrunk further, and something which BJP now going forward needs to think whether it's going to figure out a way to keep these groups within the party's fold, or it will find another way to bring other groups to just substantiate for the losses. Just to conclude, basically going forward, road to 2024 and beyond, UP basically signals BJP's ability to hold on to its Hindu social coalition. This social coalition is basically driven by, as I said, 4 factors. There is an ideological glue on the ethno-political majoritarianism front. BJP has managed to create a positive narrative on welfare. I'm not making this argument that welfare actually won the election for them, but it certainly helped them to bring down the negative images or negative conversations around governance. Third, they have a massive advantage, especially when it comes to national elections and states like UP on the leadership question. And fourth, it has an unparalleled election machine seen in modern India. The UP elections, where I traveled at least thrice in the course of last 6 to 7 months. And very early, like in October, November, it was clear to me, and I wrote in an opinion piece that now what's happening, that elections, like at the time of elections, voters are basically just mentioning issues, but they have already chosen their parties. So a large section of voters have very clear preference of who they are going to vote, and they were mentioning issues based on which party they have chosen. So they were actually rationalizing things in the conversation. There were people who were rationalizing even the dire strait of economy. They said something like, because we have to make vaccine freely available, where would the government get money from, right? So even inflation was being justified by voters. Finally, things on everyone's mind, and especially after Prime Minister's speech, is the election for 2024 over with the verdict in 2022. Politics is always dynamic, and it would be hazardous to make prediction. Options are open, but I think the emerging structure of competition basically suggests the election is actually closed in that sense. We know in many ways who the front runner in 2024 is going to be. BJP is likely to remain nationally buoyant in the foreseeable future. In states, it will continue seeing challenge, and especially given the nature of states that are coming next year, Karnataka, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, in all states, Congress is a formidable opponent. But more interestingly, what's happening is basically the perceived competition for the second spot between AAP Congress and Trinamool Congress. And this perceived competition is basically going to lower the possibility of any grand coalition taking place in the run-up to 2024. And AAP's cannibalizing ambitious attempts to basically spread itself as a national party will have serious consequences for Congress going forward. And we have already started seeing its impact in Gujarat as well as Himachal Pradesh. Those two elections, if Congress doesn't do anything drastic, will be very difficult elections for them. Finally, presidential elections are in July. So any hopes of grand coalition, grand oppositional coalition, if there are any hope, we'll get the first visible signs of it in the presidential elections then. Thank you, everyone, for patiently listening.
Thank you for that, Rahul. Really interesting stuff. And if people have questions, please do start sending them in. We do have Professor Pai here with us. Professor Pai, could I check whether you can hear us and whether we can hear you? If we could just try the technical bits out. Professor Pai, am I audible? Right, we still seem to be having some technical difficulties, so please bear with us while we iron those out. Marva, do you have any suggestions of what we could do?
Professor Pai, is your microphone working? Ask her to. Her video is on and her sound is on. I don't know. She said her browser's a bit slow, so if we give it a minute, hopefully, yeah.
So let's just give it a few more seconds. I do want to introduce Professor Pai, and we're really glad that she could join us. And hopefully we'll be able to iron out the audio difficulties in just a second. Professor Pai is the former professor of political science at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, where she taught for over 3 decades. As many of you might know, her research interests include Dalit politics, state politics in India, agrarian change, and globalization and legislative governance, to name a few. Most people here in the audience would be familiar with her research and must have read her scholarship at one point or another. She is the author of several influential books, such as Dalit Assertion and the Unfinished Democratic Revolution, Everyday Communalism, Constitutional and Democratic Institutions in India, as well as a wide number of journal articles and edited volumes. And we are delighted to have her here with us today. If I could try that again, Professor Pai, can you hear us? Right, we will keep trying to get Professor Pai on the line. Marva, if you could. So apparently she can hear us, but we are unable to hear her or see her video right now. Right, so we will try to sort this out further. Marva, if you could just explore certain options. And maybe we can start discussion based on Rahul's presentation for the time being. And we would love to hear from Professor Pai as and when we can get her back on the line. For those of us joining us online, please do start sending in your question and answers. The Q&A box should be on the bottom right corner. Rahul, thank you so much for that. And wonderful stuff, both in terms of the graphs that you've shown us, as well as some of the predictions that you have made going forward. And I do want to start out by saying that I think we need to acknowledge that Rahul was one of the first people to really stick out his neck and say, much before the 2022 election results were even on the map, and say that BSP is in a state of terminal decline. And he really called that one out, and perhaps the writing is now on the wall. So kudos to Rahul for that. But if I could really, as the chair, just to kick off the discussion, if I could really start with one of the points that you made, that to evaluate BJP's performance in 2022, we need to select not 2017 as the benchmark, but the 2019 general election results as the benchmark. And I'm wondering whether you can say a bit more about why 2019 needs to really be the benchmark, because if there's something that we have known in roughly the decade or decade and a half of Indian politics, it is the fact that voters had apparently started deciding who to vote for differently at the state level versus at the national level. Right? This is something that we saw in the 2018 Legislative Assembly election results too, where Congress supposedly did well in Madhya Pradesh as well as Rajasthan, but in 2019, it was a bit of a lame duck. So given that understanding that voters in India do tend to select, at least this was the given understanding, between state election results versus national level results, why should, in some ways, 2019, the vote share and the seat share of the assembly segments be the baseline from which then we draw these comparisons? If you could say a bit more on that.
Amok, thank you for that question, and also for that tough question. I don't have a good answer to basically say why it happened. But let me also problematize this notion, which is that voters in India vote differently for national and state election. Our evidence on this front is mixed at best, and I think, perhaps less than a quarter of voters are making this switch. and making this switch with sort of like great afterthought. And the reason why I'm saying this is that, this is not a new, if it is, it's not a new phenomena. Because if you think about the second party system between 67 and 89, Congress used to win national election, but there was a bipolarization developing in many parts of the country. Think of Punjab, think of Tamil Nadu, think of like UP also, right? So it's not that suddenly post 90s, Indian voters have started making clear distinctions between national and state elections, and they can assign clarity of responsibility. There is a segment of voters in many states, including the states that you mentioned. You can take Delhi, and best example would be Orissa, where both national and state election were held on the same day. BJD, Biju Janata Dal, did exceptionally well in the Vidhan Sabha, whereas BJP did well in the Lok Sabha. So the bottom line of this point is, yes, there is a substantial segment, but that segment is not large enough yet for us to say that voters make great distinction. The reason why I think, especially in the case of UP, we should see 2019 as a benchmark rather than 2017. And benchmark in a sense, just to see what BJP has managed to create the threshold for itself. 2019, the bipolarity in the system was visible in 2019 because you had BJP on the one side and SP plus DSP contested as an ally, right? And so because of so the way I think about politics and where you and I may disagree is, elections are largely decided much before the actual official campaign begins. They are, a structure of competition largely dictates the final outcome. So in that sense, the structure of competition that evolved specifically for UP in 2019 about the bipolarity, that put BJP in advantage going forward.
Right. Thank you, Rahul. I mean, at one level, I completely am in agreement with you, and the answer you give us seems entirely plausible. While we wait for more questions, on the question of gender, I think that for me was the biggest surprising thing of all the things that one could have said were unpredictable about the 2022 election results. I think that once we started getting the gender breakdown of the voting intentions, I think that was surprising. And I remember attending a seminar after the 2019 elections by Oliver Heath from Royal Holloway. And the results that he was running, he was showing that in those districts in those constituencies where the sex ratio was inversely correlated with BJP's performance. So the lower the sex ratio, the higher BJP's vote share was. And of course, there the question was the sex ratio could have been possibly a proxy for development indicators in that constituency. But one of the reasons that you said, women could possibly be voting in greater numbers for the BJP is the law and order narrative. And I was wondering whether you could say something more on that based on either the opinion poll data you have or based on your own travels across UP. Because what was, of course, interesting is that while BJP did come and raise the election campaign around the issue of Yogi Adityanath as the strong man, as the man of law and order, there was a fascinating report by Srinivasan Jain from NDTV where he really looked at the Home Ministry's own official data and said that the actual data does not bear out the conclusion that there has been a decline or the law and order situation has improved in any substantial way. So I was wondering whether you could hone in on that puzzle for us a little bit more.
I'm going to say something very incorrect, which is elections are not decided on what actual things look like. Elections are contested and decided on what perceptions could be created, right? So it's a game of perception at the end of the day. So you're absolutely right that on crime statistics, things might not be very, very different. But what BJP managed to do from day one, Yogi Adityanath assumed office, is to play on the card that there was a lot of lawlessness and law and order issue. And what his government is going to actually do is bring law and order in control. So they had these, anti-Romeo squad, him basically taking on organized crime, and all of these, especially the organized crime. There is a religious angle to it. There was selective targeting of certain groups, and certain groups were left out. But basically, in 5 years, they managed to create this perception that we have been working to ensure better law and order, and good law and order actually allows women to go to colleges and all those things. And simultaneously, they created this perception of the main opposition party, and their own cadres being involved in sexual harassment or eve-teasing and other things. And this is not just a narrative which got developed only in UP. Remember, the same thing happened in Bihar as well. In 2020, Bihar, the whole issue of and coming from even Prime Minister, that if RJD comes back to power, there would be Jungle Raj. I'm not saying this is the truth. It's actually their ability to create that perception, and having both online as well offline organizational machinery helps you in creating that perception through various kinds of imageries.
Right. Thank you for that, Rahul.
And so just to add that,
please do.
Basically, it's not that the BJP had an advantage among women voters. The disadvantage that the Samajwadi Party, and it's not basically the corollary effect, the disadvantage the Samajwadi Party had among women voters was, according to CSDS data, 13 percentage point, and according to Axis data, 16 percentage point. That's a huge disadvantage. Right. So, and just to something which we didn't do in our studies of elections is that we have always, even in surveys, we used to basically survey one individual of the household, right? And we assume that the entire household is actually voting in a similar fashion. I did a very small study in Delhi 2020 where we interviewed 500 households, but more than 2 members in the household. And the data basically suggests that 33%, 1/3 of the household, actually had differences in their political preferences. Those differences were not just by gender, like men or women, but also by within the household age. The uncle and the nephew is voting differently, kind of.
Right. I think the intergenerational point within households, I think, is an interesting one. It's something that I saw in Punjab, not in terms of gender, but in terms of the younger kids in the household wanting to vote for Aam Aadmi Party, whereas the older parents had a stronger inclination towards either SAD or Congress. Right. I want to quickly check whether Professor Sudha Pai can hear us. Professor Pai, if you could hear us, could you give us a sound?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I think we can hear her. She's joining us via WhatsApp, but there is a bit of a lag there and a bit of an echo problem. Professor Pai, could you try that again? No, I don't think that would work, Marva. For some reason, I think there'll be an echo.
Yeah, there's a lot of feedback.
Let's try it one more time before we sort of give up this option. Professor Pai, could you start with your presentation? Let's see whether it works. We can hear you, but there is too much disturbance in the background, I'm afraid. Right, so I don't think the WhatsApp solution would work here. So we have a question, before we try another solution there, we have a question from Mark.
Make sense of why the BJP won. I've called it, you can hear me?
Yeah. Yes, we can.
I've got continued dominance of the BJP, but with a difference. What I'm arguing is that the BJP re-established its dominance in UP, but it got 255 seats down from 312. That is 57 seats less than in 2017, though it got an increase of 3% of the vote. The SP, for the first time since 2014, was able to challenge the dominant position of the BJP in UP. It got 112 seats and it got 30.6% of the vote, rendering the election bipolar, but of course it could not defeat it. There remained a 7.5 gap between the BJP and the SP. But out of 47 ministers of the earlier government who contested, 10 were defeated, including Keshav Prasad Maurya, the Deputy Chief Minister, a very tall OBC minister. And the BJP increased its votes among all caste groups in 2022 as compared to 2017. It gained seats and votes from all regions of UP, and it set the momentum from the first phase itself, which is interrupted by a fairly resurgent SP only in the second and seventh phase. So Congress, as we know, got just 2 seats, 2.33% votes, and the BSP 1 seat with 12.9, which is very low for it. Many years since it got that much, but it did get the third highest votes in the state. If the Congress and the BJP had performed a little better, the gap between the BJP and the SP would have been narrower. But the election turned so sharply bipolar that the alliances led by the BJP and the SP polled over 80% of the votes and shared 398 of the 403 seats among them. So what are the reasons underlying the return of the Adityanav government despite poor governance, declining economy, anger on the ground against it reported by many? Much of the media has reported the communal rhetoric employed by Yogi Adityanath, Modi, Aditya Shah during the campaign. As I don't need to go into detail, Adityanath used communal terms like Abba Jaan, Chacha Jaan, the famous 80 versus 20 remark. He claimed that Akhilesh Yadav was spreading hatred in a state that was riot-free, that the Congress had planted seeds of terrorism in Kashmir, etc., etc. However, I would like to argue that in 2022, straightforward communal rhetoric was not as important as in earlier elections. The election was fought on a Hindutva template already in place, in 2014 by Modi. And when I say Hindutva template, I mean consisting of certain kinds of foundational strategies which have continued. There is much greater acceptance today of the BJP's cultural agenda among the electorate, including the OBCs and the Dalits who have supported it in increasing numbers. It is now communicated in very different ways. For example, the inauguration of the Ram Temple, the Kashi Corridor, use of religiosity, etc. Most of the strategies responsible for the BJP's victory are not immediate, but have been built under Modi's leadership over time since 2014, enabling it to win successive elections. Since 2014, Modi has employed a multi-layered discourse that can be put on a political continuum ranging from promises of development, welfare programs, cultural inclusion, communal mobilization, hyper-nationalism, etc., etc. Each strategy has been used at different points of time, separately or together, to create a Hindu vote bank, but also obtain lower caste support. And of course, to employ these strategies, the party has used both personal digital methods to convey its rhetoric, to make the image of Modi as a messiah of the poor, provider of development, good governance, and welfare. A second important strategy, gradually built since 2014, has been the targeted use of what I've called new welfareism using Aadhaar. This is based on this kind of political calculation or reckoning that there is rich electoral opportunity in providing tangible goods and services, such as cooking gas, toilets, housing, more recently free ration, plain cash, which are easy to deliver and which can be delivered in the political present. People get it in hand, as opposed to intangibles such as education or health that will deliver benefits in the distant future. So the Labhartis, as they are called, or the beneficiaries, have emerged as a strong supporting section. Many voted for the BJP, particularly the poor and disadvantaged, as they had benefited, particularly from CSBS data shows Kisan Samman Nidhi, the Ujjwala scheme, PM Awas Yojana, health insurance schemes, and of course the free ration scheme and the cash. Also, to ensure that the deliverables can be attributed to the central government and thereby the BJP, the central bureaucratic machinery has been used as much as possible, together with strong and persistent messaging highlighting the benefactor, particularly Modi. The farmers' protest, despite the rollback on November 29, 2021, did not hurt the BJP event. But it did change the electoral discourse, or rather help change the electoral discourse in Western UP from purely communal rhetoric to economic issues. It pushed the SPRLD to come together, mount a strong campaign encouraging Yadavs, Jats and Muslims to vote for them. But the growing Jat-Muslim unity encouraged by the alliance led to reverse polarization. By smaller Hindu castes like the Tyagis, Sainis, Gujars, Lohars and others, among whom there's long been a feeling that if the SPRLD alliance won, Jats and Muslims would once again be in a dominating position. They believed that only the BJP could protect them from these two, a perception which has long been encouraged and fanned by the BJP. The declining image of Adityanav due to the mishandling of the second COVID-19 wave in March, April 21, poor law and order situation, high crime rates, rising atrocities, etc., and all other kinds of problems that were there did not finally affect the BJP, although I think it contributed to bringing down the number of seats. A disciplined BJP rallied around Adityanath in an effort to portray a united party, and he was lauded for being a tough and capable administrator and for his developmental performance. Amit Shah and Modi campaigned. Modi inaugurated several projects. What was important, I think, was that an image was built around Adityanath, that he ran a strong, no-nonsense government that removed all the mafia and made the state safe for women and Dalits. The mafia and the criminals were, of course, identified with the Muslim community use of slogans such as Mafiawad, Hundagardi by Lal Topiwalas, and appeasement of one community. So the result is that the social coalition built by the BJP under Modi's leadership in 2014 and maintained ever since remained fairly intact. I wouldn't say absolutely intact, and I'm coming to that. CSDS data shows that the BJP increased and consolidated its upper caste base, but also held on to its more recently gained non-Yadav OBC base, which is expected to move away from the BJP due to the SP-RLD alliance and defection of some backward caste leaders like Swami Prasad Maurya. However, the BJP actually gained more support from lower caste constituencies, except perhaps the Rajbhars and the Malas. And the BJP remained ahead of the SP among the non-Yadav OBCs, securing 3/5 of their votes. Why did the SP not succeed in unseating the BJP, yet made considerable gains in seat and vote share? During the campaign, sensing an opportunity, Akhilesh Yadav aggressively highlighted the failures of the government, and he tried to shed the image of a Muslim Yadav party by creating an anti-BJP front of smaller OBC and Dalit parties. These are well known, I don't need to repeat them. The RLD, the Suhail Dev Bharatiya Samaj Party, the Mahan Dal, the Apna Dal, the Janwadi Party, etc. and so on. He also formed the Baba Sahib Vahini to attract Dalit votes. And so by positioning himself as the leader of the backwards, he did manage to shift the election discourse into a battle between Hindutva and social justice. I would also like to say that the SP did manage to dent the Western UP citadel of the BJP. In the 2000s, there has been an expansion of the Mandal forces downward to the smaller OBCs, who have become politically conscious and demanding, and a section of them had expressed disappointment that once the BJP won, they were not looked after at all, and some of them preferred to move to the SP. SP-RLD candidates defeated BJP leaders such as Suresh Rana, Sangeet Som, and Umesh Malik, who had been active in the Muzaffarnagar riots. The RLD won Shamli and 3 Jat-dominated seats in Muzaffarnagar district, Furkazi, Budana, and Mirapur. The SP-RLD alliance benefited from Muslim support. 36 Muslims won, up from 24 in 2017. The farmers' movement is primarily concentrated in 4 Jat-dominated districts. That is Muzaffarnagar, Shamli, Bagpat, and Meerut. Of the 19 seats in these districts, the BJP won only 6, all largely the urban ones. And in Bagpat, the RLD lost by a very narrow margin. And CSDS data points to sharp competition between the BJP and the SP for the votes of the politically ambitious and upwardly mobile Kurmi, Kohiri, Maurya, Kushwaha, Saini, and other OBCs, with other parties receiving hardly any. So there's definitely been an upsurge of the lower ones, OBCs. But this was not enough to defeat the BJP. A major reason was that the RLD was not able to sufficiently consolidate its Jat vote. A majority of the Jats, as CSDS data at least shows, voted for the BJP. The Jat Muslim combined did not materialize except in the very upper parts of West. It was confined there. It also led to counter mobilization. BJP got a little more than half of the Hindu votes, and Muslim consolidation led again to Hindu consolidation. I would like to spend a little time on the BSP because I think not much has been written or said about why the BSP is done badly. Everybody simply sort of pushed it out. The performance of the BSP has been poor. Among Dalits, BJP's share among other scheduled castes, that is the smaller ones, rose from 32 to 41. But among Jatavs, from 8 to as much as 21%. The SP also got more from the other scheduled castes, but not so much from the Jatavs. However, some fieldwork that some of us have undertaken suggests that the BSP, with a total vote share of 12.9%, was able to hold on to most of its Jatav vote. Its vote share, I would contend, fell because, as the CS data itself shows, it lost other scheduled caste groups from 44 to just 27%. But equally, it lost the Muslim vote, which consolidated behind the SP. The BSP vote share among Muslims has been falling. It fell from 19.1% in 2017 to just 6% this time. The BSP lost its Dalit Muslim combination, which had earlier enabled it to win more votes, as the Muslim community by 2022 viewed the BSP as a party unable to defeat the BJP. And of course, as I've already said, this very bipolar situation led to a very sharp contest between the BJP and SP over the Hindu vote, leading to the Muslims supporting the SP and not the BSP. Disappointment with the BSP had been building up in the 2000s with the waning of identity politics and rising desire, particularly among the smaller Dalits for material advancement, which they felt BSP could not offer. While immediately in this election there was disappointment at Delhi's inaccessibility not stepping out to campaign, I would like to flag four longer-term reasons for the downward spiral and existential crisis the BSP is facing. First, a steady depletion of its strength due to breakdown of its organizational structure at the zonal and district level, where it had a strong organization, and loss of cadres consequently. Second, despite her best efforts, which she tried before 2017 and 2019, Mayawati has not been able to rebuild the Dalit Muslim alliance, which broke down due to the Muzaffarnagar riots of 2013. Third, the departure of some of her closest and trusted lieutenants from the Muslim, OBC, Dalit and upper caste community since 2012, either through expulsion or poaching by the BJP. And fourth, the rise of a hegemonic upper caste right-wing party under Narendra Modi, which has pushed the BSP into the margins of the polity. Consequently, in the popular perception, including among Dalits, the party is viewed as being on a downward spiral and therefore cannot be revived. So in conclusion, I would say the SP did challenge the Adityanav government, but defeating it in 2024 appears a Herculean task. The reasons are, and I'm going to put them very briefly, the opposition remains divided. In fact, during the election, the Congress and the BSP, and after the election also, attacked each other. There's no united opposition, at least in sight so far. Secondly, the BJP has already begun preparations for 2024. It has, for example, extended welfare schemes which they thought brought them victory. If you look at the kind of new cabinet it has made, it has included people from all kinds of castes and communities. It has already started making a whole range of adjustments. Adityanath has already begun to build his hardline image of a strong administrator and a bulldozer Baba. But I would say this, that there is anger among the people. In the future, welfareism alone may not work. The poor, many of them argued during fieldwork that, they have aspirations. They're not interested only in goals. They would want economic empowerment, jobs, better education, etc., etc. So they said, "Ek baar aur denge, fir dekhenge." And I would finally say that there is this conventional economic wisdom, that is, the economy gets worse and worse, and people's condition gets worse. If a certain threshold of economic distress is crossed, then the chances of the electorate punishing a party becomes higher. So I will stop there. I haven't taken up too much time because I think I've already wasted a lot of your time by what happened earlier.
Uh, Thank you so much, Professor Pai, and apologies from our side for the technical issues that you had
No, it's
to.
not. I myself am not very good on internet.
No, but we're so glad that we got the chance to hear you, and I'm sure many of our participants would have been sorely disappointed if they did not get the chance to hear you as well. I have some questions, and I want to bring you and Rahul in a conversation through one of my questions. But before that, perhaps both you and Rahul could weigh on the question that Mark had asked in the chat box, which is about a supposed conflict between Modi versus Yogi, the tension there, and whether there's any evidence of that in the election results, whether that was ever a factor. Rahul, do you want to start, and then we can go to Professor Pai?
Shall I answer that?
Yes, Professor Pai, why don't you go ahead?
You see, in mid 2021, there was an attempt by the top leadership of the BJP, by that I mean Modi and Amit Shah, to make certain changes in UP. It did look as if they wanted to replace Yogi because of the so-called declining image that was appearing in the media and due to COVID and many other reasons. And or they wanted to change the composition of his cabinet and bring in, I think, somebody called Arvind Sharma, who is a Modi confidant and a retired IAS officer, who they thought could put things right in UP. But they didn't succeed for two reasons. One is that the RSS supported, for reasons I don't quite understand, supported Yogi. Second is, I think Yogi has, over the years, beginning from the early 2000s, built a certain cult image of himself in Eastern Europe. You know, he's built a certain, I've written about this in my book, Everyday Communism, he's built a certain image of himself as a Robin Hood who helps people and yet expects absolute, support from them and so on. And the Hindu Yuva Vahini that he started and so on. So he has a certain control over that region, which made him indispensable, I think. And many within the party pointed out that he should be allowed to continue and one should not change just before an election. So for a variety of reasons, a truce had to be called, as it's called, between the two. Now, I remember saying this at an earlier webinar and being shouted down that, there was something wrong between Modi and Yogi Adityanath. I still think that the BJP is a very disciplined party, and unlike the Congress, which went to town about Prashant Kishore and so on, they don't show their differences. They are able to hide them, and they are a very disciplined party. I still think that between the two, there is something, but Yogi having won, that may have sort of cancelled it or something. But a truce was definitely called, and there was a little bit of uneasiness between the two. There were some journalists who mentioned that Modi would not be very comfortable if Yogi did too well in 2022, because that would dent his image in 2024. Now, these are all speculations. I think we'll have to wait and see. Right now, there seems to be a truce. There seems to be absolute unity, and Yogi Adityanath is managing. But one last point I'd like to make is he's survived, unlike chief ministers in Assam, in Uttarakhand, and elsewhere, who could be replaced. So he has a certain space and image of his own, which I think is what kept him there.
Thank you for that, Professor Pai. And I think I do agree with you on your point about, BJP
now
being disciplined.
Now I can.
Sorry?
Okay, now I can hear you now.
Yeah, I was saying that I do agree with your point about BJP being a disciplined party and its ability to hide its internal conflicts. And, I often think back to Christophe Jaffrelot, who, in his first book back in 1996 said that factionalism, which has historically been a problem in the Congress, does not appear in the same way in the BJP. And it's surprising how that conclusion from the mid-90s in some ways still remains true.
The other thing that was mentioned to me was that the RSS has the ability to disagree, to compete with each other, and yet work together. If you understand what I mean. That is, they will disagree, they will compete for the same post against each other, but when it comes to elections and the outside world, they will work together.
Right.
This, I believe, this was told to me by Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay, who has a book on the RSS, and who said that this is the way they function. it doesn't mean that they don't compete internally with each other. But when it comes to things like elections, they're able to work together. So there is a certain method in which the BJP and the RSS works. And I think that brings them success and it makes them a different party from the others. Yes, from the Congress particularly.
Right. If there are any more questions as we are drawing towards an end, if there are any more questions, please do send those in from the participants. But perhaps one point in which I could perhaps bring Professor Pai and Dr. Verma in conversation. In both of your comments, you seem to agree on the point that this is an indication that UP politics is moving towards a certain bipolarity. Perhaps a provocative question that I would want to get both of your thoughts on is that was there ever a possibility that the bipolarity could have been between BSP and BJP rather than SP and BJP? So was SP being the contender against the BJP, was that a foregone conclusion in your opinion? Or do you think what are the questions? Is it Mayawati's leadership? Is it simply the intractable nature of the social cleavages in Uttar Pradesh that made this a foregone conclusion that the bipolar picture would be one between SP and BJP rather than between BJP and some other party? Professor Pai, do you want to get us started and then maybe we can Rahul's opinion on that?
Okay. Well, I would say this, that if the bipolarity had been between the BSP and the BJP, the chances of the BSP winning would have been higher. And I say this because of Mayawati's image. Mayawati has the image of good law and order, of communal, of free, there being no communal riots during her time. And thirdly, of having the complete support of her core constituency when they make up their mind that Bhengi should win. But the problem is the weakness of the BSP, which has been there gradually building up even before 2012. And that's why I flagged those 4 issues. Those 4 issues are what has weakened the BSP. Here I would like to say that I have a certain personal view on the BSP, which others may not agree, that the BSP is entering, that Dalit politics entering a post-BSP phase. That is, the BSP in the 1990s was highly successful in giving them dignity, self-respect, confidence, political empowerment, etc. But it's not a party that was able to give economic advancement or material advancement. So by the 2000s, Dalits began to feel that, self-respect, dignity, to sab theek hai, but we want a full stomach, we want a job, we want our children to advance, we want upward mobility. And that's why they were attracted by the BJP. The Sarvajan experiment did give them something, but UP economy was so bad that in 5 years she could not have actually helped the Dalits. That is, aspirations had skyrocketed. And what she could do in 5 years is that she raised more aspirations than she could fulfill. Because everybody thought that now that she's won, we'll get everything. And that was not possible because obviously the Dalits are where they are and the Brahmins and the upper caste elites are where they are. So you cannot change all that overnight simply by coming to power. So I think the BSP today is on a downward spiral, but it has achieved a great deal. And today, I think Dalit assertion would have to take newer forms. I don't think the BSP, unless it does something very, she's trying now, I believe, to revive the Muslim Dalit combination, go back to her old Dalit thing, but I'm not very sure whether she'll succeed. So I think the chances of the BSP really reviving in the very near future, by 2024 at least, seem to be dim. Where the SP is concerned, what is unfortunate is the image that Mulayam Singh built up. One is Maulana Mulayam, which keeps him out of the, out of the Hindu vote to some extent, because he was given that kind of image by the BJP in the 1990s itself, post Mandal, that and post the Ram Mandir, because of Ram Mandir and so on. And secondly, he failed to homogenize all the backward castes, and it remained a Yadav party, and it also, unfortunately, and to some extent, it's true, as a very Guna party, as a mafia party. So his image, which he inherited from his father and which he's trying desperately to throw off, is not as good as that of Mayawati. So I would agree that if Mayawati was the contender, she might have had a better chance. This is my personal view.
Well, I do think that the title post-BSP Dalit Politics would make for a very evocative title for a journal article or for a book. So we look forward to that.
Well, I'm going to write something on that very soon.
Right. Rahul, could I get your thoughts on this counterfactual before we bring the panel to an end?
I agree with Professor Pai on basically Dalit politics entering into a new phase. Your question, Amog, is could BSP have been in the bipolarity, the second party in this election? No. It was very clear, not in 2022. Basically, by 2014 and 2017, it was very clear that BSP is on a path of decline. So the second, the second end of the bipolarity could be the party which is second, not the third. And there are good reasons for it, as Professor Pai already pointed out, the organization, the leadership, and other things. So the question for us to think about is why basically SP remained the player and BSP declined. I think there are a couple of things. One, SP between 2014 and 2022, one has a larger or a more broad social base compared to the BSP. So without the broader social base, it's basically hard for you to attract more voters. The second is basically SP still has a second rung leadership at the district level. What happened between 2014 and 2022, every year, you saw desertion of very senior BSP leaders. And in the run-up to this election, you saw BSP, which has 19 MLAs in 2017, was reduced to just 2 or 3 MLAs. So basically the attrition, which was for long in making, the possibility of BSP being the second player was very, very low. Of course, like in the realm of counterfactual, all plausibilities are there. In the game of probability, it was very low.
Right. Thank you for that, Rahul. Right, so if there are any other questions, please do send them in now. I'll just take 1 or 2 other seconds. But we have used up all the time we had for the panel discussion. And in fact, we have overshot. So maybe I can just take this opportunity to thank our 2 panelists. Maybe a virtual round of applause could be in order. Thank you to both Dr. Rahul Verma and to Professor Sudha Pai. Thanks also to Marva at the IndOx team who has helped us run this, this panel discussion through all our administrative help. And thank you all for joining us. Hopefully you will also join us for all future events that will be organized under the IndOx banner. And until then, thank you. And once again, thanks to Dr. Verma and Professor Pai. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Amog, Marwa, and Professor Pai and Nandini. And thank you, everyone who joined today. Thank you.